When it comes to women and morality, women typically lack morality. The overwhelming reason is because women are weak and women don't have the ability to shape the world around them. Men don't adapt to women, women adapt to men. That's why a red pill tenet is that women adapt to the environment that you put them in. And so in this particular environment, why are women the way they are? Why are women promiscuous? Why do women utilize the state against men? It's because that's the environment that they're placed in. They just simply use the tools that they have available to them. And so this is why you see a lot of men that they're referred to as passport bros. These are men that are typically, being shamed because, you're only going over there because you can't get women over here, or you're taking advantage of hypergamy. And for many of these men, the reality is that isn't the case. For a lot of these men, they're taking advantage of other patriarchal societies where men are typically the leaders in the family. Now in America, that doesn't work because America is the world reserve currency. And as a result of being the world reserve currency, America needs women to consume. And women consume more than men do. And so single women consume more than married women. And so in a society where America is trying to push out the dollar to these countries, because if the dollar starts to go down in its use, well then people will use another currency. And what that basically means for America, since America doesn't produce anything, is that the quality and the standard of living in America will go down. So America doesn't have to produce anything, it just has to print dollars that it gives to its citizens to consume. And the biggest consumers are women. That's why you see obesity rates in Western countries are so high. Why? Because they consume more. They have the ability to consume more because their government is able to give them welfare. And in countries where you see welfare, you see obesity. That's why when you go to foreign countries, you go to Southeast Asia, you go to Colombia, typically you go to places in South America, the women are thinner. One reason is because they need resources, so they require men. And men typically want young and fit women. And so the women have to compete for the men. And so in those scenarios, you don't see the obesity rates among women like you do in Western countries. Because in Western countries, they get welfare. That's why you see obesity rates so high in black culture. Because I think it's like 40% of all African American women are on some form of welfare. Some statistics show it as high as 50%. That's why you see the rates of child without fathers, black kids growing up without fathers, because those women can get their resources from the government, so they don't need the men to provide for them. The government provides for them. The only thing that the women have to do is the women have to vote for the expansion of government. And that's why some of the biggest voters for the Democratic Party are basically the black slave class in America. Why do black women overwhelmingly vote Democrat? It's because they're slaves to the plantation. And this is why you see when you look at married rates, married black women vote Republican. Not because they're pro-right, but because they're not pro-taxation. They're not pro the expansion of government, which then reduces the pricing power for their family of their ability to buy goods and services. Whereas when you look at it on the single motherhood or on single women, overwhelmingly those women vote left. They're left-leaning because they require resources. And so the government just understands simple biology. They understand the simple biology that women require resources and that men have to go out and get those resources to acquire women. But when the government stands in between men and women and their ability to have relationships, the government sits right in between as a counterparty. And so the women will vote for the government to take care of them because the government has less requirements. Whereas a man requires you to be fit, requires you to be friendly. Obviously, they require you to take care of the home, to have children, etc. Where the government doesn't have that as a requirement. The government requires you to vote, and that's it. That's why you see obesity rates among black Americans are so high. Well, it's because of welfare. This is the first time in history where the poorest people are the fattest. And of course, with that comes other health-related issues. But it just becomes a kind of a self-fulfilling little circular issue where these people become obese, they become dependent upon the government, then they become dependent upon the government to intervene after the effects of obesity, like diabetes. That's why you see, every time I see a commercial for lowering insulin, it's always a black woman that's on there. Why? Because black women are the most obese in America. And you see obesity rates going up among single women. And this is going to continue until it all eventually comes to an end. Now, for women who obviously understand, men leaving the country doesn't propose as big an issue. The real issue is that women understand that they're going to have to work for the rest of their life. And so this idea of equality in America is just so that America can push out the dollar. That's the only reason why they need all these women to go to work. They need all these women to go to work to pay for the welfare programs. Why is the border open? They need the border open because they need people to come onto the plantation to pay for the welfare programs. And people understand this. They understand, even though they're against the borders being open, they're always talking about how all these people are coming in illegally, but who's going to pay for the welfare? You see the exact same thing in all Western countries. All Western countries who can import people do. That's why you see what's going on right now. There was there's starvation in other countries that's going on. For example, like in Africa. And so what they've stated, many of these people, they say you're causing inflation. That inflation is going to cause a shift of people, because as the poor cannot afford to live here because you're exporting your inflation. Now you have this huge caravan of migrants of the poor that are coming to the Americas, and they're coming into Western countries. This is by design. Why? Because they need people to pay for the welfare. So you raise inflation in other countries by giving your citizens dollars or euros. Then you buy goods from another country. That raises the price of commodities, as these countries then, the narrative of oil is bad, so we need to reduce the amount of oil because we need to save the planet. Well, what does that allow companies to do? It causes scarcity. Scarcity raises prices. When prices raise abroad, that causes inflation abroad. Those countries, because they can't print without creating inflation in their own country, they can't do that. So the only thing that their exporters can do is they have to raise prices. And then those prices become unobtainable for the local inhabitants. Then the local inhabitants shift into Western countries that are dying because those inhabitants are not having children. It's a very simple design. And when you understand what is going on, it's just basically one group of people that are just exploiting another group of people. And it's Western countries via the women by design to grow the government, to pay for all the welfare programs, because no one will allow spending to cut. Eventually, this is just socialism. This is just socialism. This is what you have. You have a global socialist organization. Yes, there are facets of fascism, facets of capitalism, but overwhelmingly in the West utilizes socialism for their own inhabitants at the expense of those abroad. But what happens is when those countries start to expand, as they start to grow and they grow their infrastructure, now they start to compete with the West. And this is what is going on. The whole point of the war that is going on right now is that other countries like India and Africa, Brazil, etc., right, the BRICS nations, like China, obviously, they're starting to grow. And as these Western countries are virtue signaling about we need to save the planet, overwhelmingly, what they're trying to do is they're trying to depopulate undesirable nations. This happened in the early Americas. If you do a little bit of research, I was reading about this a couple of weeks ago one night when I was at work. The very first group in America to receive birth control were Puerto Ricans, Puerto Rican women. And they were not told what the medication was doing for many of them. They told them that it would help them to slow down their, having births and be able to control it. But what's happening is many of these women were having side effects. They were having neurological and cardiac side effects. And so when the women started reporting all these different issues to their doctors, the doctors, all right, who were like, well, this medication is for reproduction, it shouldn't have an effect on your heart or on your liver or on your kidneys or on your neurological system. They started to dismiss that they were having these effects related to the medication. And the very first group in America, once they realized, hey, we can use this particular medication to depopulate people via controlling birth rates, the very first place where it was given to were to Black Americans in Brownsville, Brooklyn. Because the goal were to depopulate the expanding Black community. You can just look this up, and it was proposed by Margaret Sanger. At the exact same time, this very same lady was a proponent for HBCs, historically Black universities, historically Black colleges. So you have a woman whose sole purpose was to depopulate minorities, who then backed a college to indoctrinate those very same minorities. And that is why today, I think it's like over 40% of all abortions take place in Black communities. But you don't hear a lot of this stuff being talked about. A lot of the solutions from yesterday are the problems of today. And it's always the same thing. It's how this small group of people can get over on minorities. And if you're not smart enough to understand, and if you don't read, this is why you look at, for example, this just recently came out where, I forget what state it was. It was in Baltimore, It was in Baltimore, where the young Black boys, the young Black children in Baltimore cannot do math. And so what they state is, well, the reason you can't do math and you can't read and you can't do science is because of racism. So we're not going to have you pass all these exams because this is systemic racism. And it's just for the purpose of enslaving minorities, to keep them down so that they can force them to pay for welfare. That's all that it's about. It's just socialism at the end of the day. And if you understand how socialism works, that's why, Joe Biden was on TV the other day touting about, the unemployment rate is so low. But what they don't tell you is they have a huge rate of people that just don't want to work. We have the highest the highest rate of people not participating in the labor market. There's over 100 million people in America that just don't work. How do they survive? Welfare. That's all that it is, just welfare. How do these people survive? They survive on welfare and the expansion of socialism. And America is a socialist nation. It's been a socialist nation for a very long time. Every country that has a central bank is a socialist nation. And all those banks exist in the West, overwhelmingly. And that's what they want to expand. They want to expand socialism. And eventually socialism turns into communism. Because when people start working and resources start diminishing, for the government to be able to retain their power, they have to take control of the resources. And this is what you see. This is what is going on globally. This is what happened 100 years ago and why America went to war. You had World War I and World War II. It was because the globe was becoming more communistic. And that's what was spreading around the world. And people fought against it. But people forgot. And we're right back where we started 100 years ago. Finishing what they started. The expansion of socialism. The expansion of communism, which is what socialism always ends. Many Hispanics understand this because they come from socialist nations. But America, in essence, is the cleanest shirt in the hamper, as they say. Anyway, I'm about to head into the gym. But it's important to understand what is going on and how this all ends. For men looking for families, America is not the place. You can do it in areas where you don't have government control over your reproduction, where women can just basically walk away and take all of your resources. In other countries, they can't do that. And those are the countries where you should expand. Eventually, it all self-corrects, eventually. But in the meantime, you have to do what you have to do to survive. Anyway, I'm going to leave it here. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.